So I work for a large commercial bank, and I manage a team of salespeople who interact with small business owners across the country, and then have some additional responsibility just managing our floor at the site that we're here in Richmond.
So, what are the key skills and character qualities that are required to do your job?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is obviously leadership, understanding how to manage people. Um, and I would say really taking ownership. So, like, the biggest thing that I look at when it comes to how I do my job well is I always joke, people say, I try to keep stuff off my boss's desk. If I'm putting a lot of stuff on his desk, I'm not doing my job, right? And so, really just taking that ownership of my business, managing people, and that can be very different, right? People have different personalities, different skill sets. And so just being very cognizant of that, a lot of coaching and development. So those are really the key things that I do. And then partnerships, right? Because everything that we do at the bank is driven by people being willing to send us business. And so we have to build those partnerships to get the opportunity to speak to clients.
So, how do you really experience God's presence and pleasure at your secular job?
Yeah, I would say the kingdom is all about people. And we get caught up a lot of times with stuff, but it's about people. And so for me, like that's the best part of my job is just interacting with people all day long, whether I'm talking to clients, whether I'm talking to partners, whether I'm talking to my associates. And so, I'm an extrovert. People for me are like oxygen. Like if you were to stick me in a warehouse with one person by myself, I would lose it. But I work on a floor with 70 people every day. I interact with, hundreds of people across the bank on a monthly basis. And so for me, that's what I love. I just love people. I love the relationships that I get to build, the network of people I get to build, the things I get to learn from them. So for me, it's kind of simple. I mean, it's just I love people. So yeah.
Obviously, bivocational, right? You are a professional minister in one capacity of your life, and then you're professional banking on the other side.
Yeah.
Is there ministry in both of those roles?
Oh yeah. I mean, the cool thing about work is if you look at your job as an opportunity to live out your faith, and you don't have to shove it down people's throats, but you just by the way the integrity you have, the way you care for people, like a lot of times I get to, especially with my role, do individual coaching and development with my associates. So I get to spend quality one-on-one time with them. I get to learn about them, their families, what motivates them, the things that they're going through. I get to even something as simple as, hey, I'm going to keep you in prayer for that. And now it's gotten to where people know, Lee's a believer. I can go to him and he'll keep my mom in prayer for this, or so and so in prayer for this. And then what was cool through that is kind of just living that kind of, quietly, but not hey, I'm a Christian, right? What started to happen in the office was a few other believers started saying, hey, you know what? Like, let's get together and do something more here. And that opened up a cool door where we started a prayer group, every week. And so we've been doing that for probably 3 or 4 years. Obviously, the pandemic stopped it a little bit, but as we've gotten back in the office, we're starting that back up. So I mean, it's just been a neat opportunity and seeing how God works.
When you're thinking about your workplace, I mean, how do you kind of engage in ministry? Is it water cooler evangelism, or is there more to it?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of it is, you can have the water cooler moments. I think part of it is just what you do in day in and day out, right? Like I tell people all the time, if you really want to be successful, particularly I feel like in the corporate world, you have to be other oriented. A lot of people are very, and we don't mean to be, but we're obviously naturally very selfish, right? And so one of the things I've learned, particularly in the space that I'm in, because we're so dependent on others to help us be successful, I have to be other oriented. And so that's part of the gospel. That's part of how Jesus lived when he was here, was making other people more important than yourself. And so doing that day in and day out in small things, stuff as simple as someone reaching out for help, and you're not the person that does that, rather than just pushing them off to another 800 number or an email box saying, you know what, I'm going to help you. I'm going to reach out because I know someone through my relationships that I built who I think can help you and help them make that connection. Sometimes it's just something small as that. And then like, hey, thank you for taking the time and doing that. I know you didn't have to. I know you could have just pushed me off to so-and-so, but I appreciate it. And those type of things, I think, build you a lot of credibility because people know that you care. They know that you're genuine. They know you're sincere. And so something as simple as that. I mean, just, again, making people important every day in what you do. And you never know with the relationships. I mean, I've had situations where I've literally, like, one of the things I learned from my boss, and he is probably one of the smartest people I've ever worked for, is every Friday he blocked out, and he's done it for 20 years now, 30 minutes on his calendar every Friday, and he reaches out to someone new at the bank that he doesn't have a relationship with. And so you can imagine now he knows a ton of different people at the bank just by doing that one activity. So I started that about 3 years ago. Every Friday on my calendar, I have 30 minutes blocked out, and I just go in the directory and I find someone who I never talked to, don't know, and I connect with them. Well, through that, that's how I've been able to help certain people where they're like, hey, I got this weird issue with like this client's online banking, but in this specific section of it. And I'm like, oh, I know somebody that helps manage the online banking product and I can get them connected, right? And so relationships really become, so important just in terms of how you facilitate your day, how you get things done, but how you build relationship with people.
So, what are the main influences that have shaped your perspective on work? Parents, role models, books, culture, church, and whatever. You tell me.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say definitely first off was my parents. My dad, I mean, I remember growing up as a child. I mean, he was on the road a ton. I mean, I remember basically I knew my dad for the first couple of years through an envelope that came, every couple of weeks because he was working on the movies and he was traveling a ton. But he had this sense of, I'm going to make sure I take care of my family. And so people can say, oh, well, he wasn't there. But for him, his way of being there was making sure that we had a roof over our head and making sure my mom and I, and eventually my sister were able to have a good life, right? And so I learned a lot about his work ethic. My mom, she eventually started her own business. She got laid off in corporate America and she took her severance package and went and started a cleaning business and built that up. And so I learned a lot about just entrepreneurship and small business owners and how they're wired from my mom. And then a big part of it, honestly, was Needle's Eye. I mean, Buddy, did a lot in terms of mentoring me in my early 20s when I had gotten involved with Needle's Eye. J.C. Cancelleri, who used to be on the board at Needle's Eye, was a huge influence in my life. And then just, other older men that I had met through life. A guy named Jim Trusty, he was a UPS truck driver, and he went to my old church. And Jim was someone who was, when I met him, I was probably in my mid 20s and he was in his late 40s, but he just had a heart for young men. And so he took time and invested in me. So yeah, I mean, it was really a collection of different aspects.
So, anyone, right, regardless of religious faith, can work hard and can be a nice coworker.
Yep.
How does your relationship with God make a tangible difference in how you do your job or how you treat others?
Yeah. So the biggest piece I think of what makes us a believer versus a non-believer, and there's a part of scripture that I always really loved where, we hear the phrase, take up your cross and follow me. Jesus says that, but there's also another version of that in one of the other gospels where it says, take up your cross daily. And so the Christian walk in a lot of ways is about, crucifying your flesh, crucifying yourself, your selfish desires, your wants, and really, like we talked about earlier, making other people more important than yourself. That's what Jesus modeled consistently, right? So how do you do that in a workplace? Well, I've been in situations where I'm on a call with multiple executives and we all think we're right on something. And you have to know when to say, you know what, I'm not going to, damage this person in front of other people just to prove a point, even if I'm right. I've had to learn sometimes just to swallow my ego and say, you know what they said was wrong, but I'm going to wait till after this call and I'm going to call them offline and I'm going to save them dignity. And I'm going to say, hey, you actually were wrong on that. I'm just telling you, here's how I feel about it, but I didn't want to put you on blast in front of the group. Like simple things like that, that is where your faith really should show a difference. And it's hard because it's a daily struggle, right? We're, like I said, we're selfish by nature. We want to be right. And do I get it right all the time? No. There's been moments where I've, done things that I wish I could take back, and I've had to be a big person and pick up the phone and call somebody and apologize, right? Because we're all human. Yeah, I mean, I think our faith has to make us want to value others over ourselves. And sometimes we just have to let our ego, our pride, whatever you want to call it, be crucified. So
What has God taught you through your work and your career to this point?
oh man, leadership is tough. I would say, and I'm not saying this to be funny, but I have a much deeper appreciation for people like Moses now in the Bible, because managing people is very difficult. A lot of people think it's this illustrious thing, and they want the title, and they want the bigger paycheck, and they want the responsibility, and it is messy and it is tough, and people will sometimes show you the best sides of themselves, and you'll be like, man, it's almost like that coach. You're like, yes, we've been working on this and you did an awesome job. And then sometimes you will see some of the worst in people, and you have to be able to navigate that and deal with that in love and care for people, and also balance the what the company expects in terms of employee management and performance and things like that. But managing people is tough. But I think God has taught me a lot about patience, about really coaching and developing people. That's been really, I've done that a lot more in my job the last couple of years than I probably did when I was first in leadership. And that just means you have to take time. You have to really take time to invest in people. You have to learn how to prioritize things. A lot of times in work, we prioritize task over people. And I was guilty of that. I mean, if I left every day and my email box was clean and all my calendar events were done and all of my busy work was done, great. But if I hadn't done a what we call like a coaching session with one of my employees, it was no big deal. Whereas now it's like, no, I'm going to make sure at least every day I'm having one or two individual connects with one of my teammates, making sure we've pulled up, talked about, what they're doing and stuff. And then I can get to the other stuff, when I need to get to it. And most time I get most of it done. And if not, some of it carries over to the next day. So just things like that, I would say is some of the things that God's really taught me.
So for you personally, what are the indicators of being fully engaged? When you know, like, I'm in it and God is really working through me in this job.
So really, I would say one is when I'm very I have a kind of a part of my background is strategy. So I have a very good creative mind where I come up with concepts and ideas that we can help implement and change things in our organization that make an impact for either the clients or the partners or the business. So for me, when I'm really kind of in that fifth gear, if you want to call it, is when my creative energy is moving, right? And a lot of times that's when I specifically block out intentional time for myself to really kind of take a step back and say, okay, where are we trying to go? What are we trying to accomplish? Right. And so that for me is huge. A book that I really have loved, there's a book by a guy named Cal Newport, and it's called Deep Work. And that was a book that I had read, and he really helped talk about how do we get to the most impactful work that we do in our careers. And he wrote another book called So Good They Can't Ignore You, which is also another really great read. He's a super smart guy. But that would be one thing I would say is my creative energy. The other thing for me is when I get those coaching moments, like with individual associates, because that's when I'm going to have the biggest impact on someone. Like if someone's performance is off, bringing them into my office, talking with them. Well, how are your partner connects going this month? Oh, well, you haven't really connected with your partners. Well, why do you think they haven't sent you any business then? They don't work for you. They're not your employee. They're an equal of yours. They have other things that they're responsible for, right? And so something like that changes that person's mind, and then all of a sudden, boom, the next 2-3 months, they end up, improving their performance, which also drives their income better for their family, right? So just those type of things, I really love when I'm able to do a lot of coaching and development, and then just using my creative energy.